hope you all are doing well. Today we are going to be talking about Dune by Frank Herbert. Now, I'm going to be talking about the book, not the movie. I've already done a movie review, so if you haven't checked that out, you can go check that out. Um, but I'm really excited to talk about this book. It's been on my list for a long time, even before I've been doing this channel. It's been a book that a lot of people have been recommending to me. Even though I tend to be mostly just strictly fantasy, I do sometimes step into the realm of sci-fi, and the genres tend to bleed together pretty well in certain aspects. So it's just been one of these things that I've like, I gotta read this, I gotta read this, I gotta read this. And then the movie came out, and so it kind of started making its way back up to the top of my list. And I managed to finish it while traveling around for the holidays, so really excited to talk about it. I'm going to start off with trying to do non-spoiler stuff, so for those who haven't read the book yet, whether or not you want to read it. One thing that I think this book does really, really well, and I think if you watch the movie you can see this as well, is the world building is really awesome. There's so much detail and life built into Arrakis, and I really love the play with the cultures and stuff like that. Um, it to me it really drives home, like, I think that's his best quality of writing, is really these elements of world building, similar to Robert Jordan's, who wrote The Wheel of Time. And it like, I just can't describe how it's really good. And this book is not very long. It's only a 20-ish hour audiobook. So it does a lot of work really quickly, including like other parts of this galaxy universe that we get to explore. Not necessarily directly, but we get like little glimpses of these other planets that exist, primarily being focused on Arrakis, though. I really. There are some good characters that I really enjoyed through this book. I would say that I kind of want to get into some of the like critiques, because the those are kind of where like I'm having some issues with the book, and I won't go into too much detail here. I'll do a little bit more spoilers in a sec, but um, this book is almost split up into like two very distinct parts: the beginning and the ending part. And this isn't really a huge spoiler, but there's a bit of a time leap in between part one and part. There's different parts throughout the books, but there's like kind of a very distinct split where there's a pretty big time jump. And I personally wasn't a huge fan of that. I felt like it took away a lot of opportunities to build on these character relations and really explore the Fremen culture and how it operates and how it survived so long, and get to see more parts of Arrakis that we don't really get to see in the books. And I'm wondering about the choice to do the time skip. It just feels very awkward and like a very big missed opportunity. It almost causes this lack of setup for the conclusion of the book, which overall isn't the worst thing in the world, but it just didn't leave me with the same impact I would have liked to see from this book. Especially, and part of it might be because, like, again, I've had people telling me for many years to read this, and there's an element of when people hype up books or shows or whatever, we set certain expectations for that product, and if it doesn't meet our expectations that we've built it up to in our heads, it sometimes can feel like a little disappointment. And I feel like that's a little bit of what's happening here for me. Is I expected it to be this like S tier masterpiece, and I think it's still a good book. I'd probably put it in like an A tier, maybe probably mid A, I would say, because there's still great parts of it, but it doesn't have quite the punch I really wanted to feel. and I think for me too, like I really enjoy those like really hard hitting moments in books are from really deep character moments, and without the setup that was required, I don't feel like it had quite as much of a kick that I wanted to with the ending. So I would still say you should, I really think that you should check out this book. I think it's good. I think it's definitely got some interesting aspects to it. But, if you're not really into sci-fi and you are more of like, I really don't know how to say this. It's got good plotting elements as well. I would like lower your expectations just like a little bit. Take them down just a notch. Um, because I think people tend to way overhype things, and I don't want other people to kind of get burned by that like I did a bit. So just lower your expectations a little bit. Read it. It's still really good. There's a lot of good elements to it, and I'm excited to hear what other people think about this because I've talked to quite a few people about it, but always love to hear from everyone. But now I want to go into a bit more of the spoilers. So if you don't want any spoilers, if you haven't read the book, then goodbye. Hope you had a good time. Come back when you've finished the book. But for those who do want spoilers, the biggest thing with the whole plot line that goes on here is, especially when I'm talking about like this non-setup stuff, is we get this time skip at a very awkward place in Paul's life where a lot of stuff is happening, and we get this jump where we get elements of, we have like his son, we have his wife, and we don't get to see any of these relationships be built. And that could have been like a really good, because like his son dies at the end in this battle, and that could have really hit home, but it doesn't. And I don't really care about his wife at all, because it's like we get to introduce to her like right before the time skip, and then like all the relationship building between them has happened in this time skip. And it would have been nice to see these moments, and maybe it could have been done in like flashback or in dialogue and stuff like that to make them, make us have this connection. Because the first half of the audiobook, for those of you who don't know, I listen to mostly to audiobooks rather than physically read. But the first half of this audiobook, I think, is like close to like 14, 15 hours. And then the last half is only like 5 hours of the book. So the conclusion and the after the time skip is only, like a fourth of the novel. And it feels very disproportionate in reading. Like it felt like but prior to the time skip could have almost been its own book if there would have been a little bit more solid of a conclusion. Maybe a little bit of seeing the Fremen society and have like some kind of like fight or like taking control happen prior to the time skip, and then after the time skip we get to explore the consequences of all these and how he's integrated with the Fremen and stuff like that, which would have been really interesting. But I think we needed a lot more there than what we got, because again, don't care about any of those relationships. The only relationship that I feel like was built really, really well was the relationship between Paul and like the people in his father's court, especially with his mother. So, and I know there's some mirroring between like his dad and his mom's relationship and Paul and his wife's, wife, quotation marks, his lover, because I guess they're technically not married, and he's gonna marry the princess, but she's just gonna be like a political marriage, and that's cool. But again, it doesn't have that much. It doesn't have that feel that I was really, really searching for. I loved the sister coming in. I really liked her in the story. It was like very well done, and like this really like almost creepy element to the universe and stuff like that that I thought was really like really really interesting and well done. Um, and then I'm trying to think through like every little thing. The conclusion is really where I had the most gripes with, and it was like one of those things I was disappointed. It was like I was just underwhelmed more than anything. I think that's the best way to put it. But the the Paul becoming the emperor was a bit of like a, oh yeah, that's very obvious. Seemed like where this book was headed to. Again, felt like it could have been expanded a little bit more on. And I know there's other books in Dune that happen after this. I don't know if I'll read them or not. I might put them on my list. They're probably going to move down quite a bit. Not that I don't think they'd be interesting, but I've heard that after this book, they're kind of meh. And people might be able to correct me. Maybe they're not, and they're really great. But I've got so many things on my list that I'm not sure those are going to make it up there. I think that's really it. I mean, there's just a lot of like those setup. Oh, the future thing was what I was. I was like, I don't know, on the tip of my tongue. But the visions that Paul have, I really, one of my favorite moments of the books that really stuck with me is when he has the fight with Jessica after his Mentap abilities start coming in, and he's like, "You made me a freak," and there's this power there, but there's almost like this logical takeover of his brain where it's like trying to like fight with like this emotional and logical side. And I thought that was really really cool, and I really liked when like with all these powers kind of coming together and coalescing, they do it in such a weird way, and that allows him to see, you know, visions of the future and different timelines and stuff like that. I really think what this book could have benefited from, and is a super big missed opportunity as well, is to have some of those futures, either alternate or are the timeline we get out of this, pop up in like dreamlike sequences that we get to see through Paul's eyes. I I wanted those so bad to really like solidify the foreshadowing and those elements of the series, and to see like, because there's this we're told that there's like this fear of these futures that he basically could be like killing, you know, a lot of people. And I really think that there would have been like these really, you know, you could have gotten some really good scenes and see how like terrified he is of his own power and what he is actually capable of doing, being able to see these alternate realities and these potential timelines we could be following. All right, last thing on the book. This isn't really a positive or a negative. I'm not really critiquing this. It's just a weird stylistic choice that I was really aware of and I didn't particularly like myself, which was the third omniscient perspective that we got, where we're never really in one person's head. We're bouncing around a lot to each person's head. I thought that Frank Herbert did that really, really well, which is surprising because I don't particularly like that. But it was still one of those things where I felt a little pulled out of it, and I think that might just be because of, you know, especially with more like modern writing, we're pretty much in third limited, where like each chapter or each like section is divided up in one character's view. We get to see, we're inside the head of one character and we get to see it through their eyes, before like usually there's like a break and then we get to see it through another character potentially. And so I have this feeling that for me it's a bit of like, you know, preconception that I have to that, like not really enjoying that because I'm so used to the other style. I mean, third person limited and first person are not, they're not the same, but they share similarities in a way where you're stuck kind of in one person's head a little bit. But this was like, I mean, we would bounce from one scene. We'd be in, Paul's head, then Jessica's head, then back to Paul's, then over to Gurney, and then back to Paul, and then back to Jessica. And it's like, to me, that was just like, it was a good way to dole out extra information, but it almost felt unnecessary and took away a little bit of mystery that could have been put more into the book. Like, we know from the beginning, right, that like who the traitor is. We're very well aware of that. And I would have been interested to have that maybe played up a little bit more, where it's like, oh, who could it be? But, there's elements and choices that we make, and maybe if it was written today, if it was written today, it'd probably be significantly different than than it has been published. So, but overall, I'm interested. I'm really interested to know. I've had quite a few people read this book, the first book of Dune, but I haven't heard much about the sequels. I think there's prequels as well. So I'm wondering if they're worth reading. If any of you have read them, let me know in the comments if I should, think about putting those onto my list, maybe moving them up a little bit. And if so, like, which ones should I read? Where do I start? I think Messiah is the second one, the sequel to this book directly, but I'm not 100% sure. I will probably do some research on that and try to figure that out. But again, not on the top of my priority list. I got a ton of other book series that I'm going to be working on throughout 2022 and probably beyond. But I'd be interested to know, because I do really like getting more depth in, especially in like these series. I love getting like really deep series books, because there's just so much time that the writer has to work with and really build up these character relations. So I think that's going to be it for this one. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope to see you back again. Thanks for watching.